wasn't just a fan site.
It was the world's first mobile artist service. We launched that in 2002 when we basically had 13-year-old girls dialing 0900 numbers. I mean, it had not had a single complaint because it was actually worth British business. However, AI in the future of work. Welcome to the future, dear people. Before I start, do you know what this thing is? Good man. Science fiction. HAL 9000. And he was basically the lead character in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, because we're a little bit beyond 2001, I thought this would be a fitting thing to start. And yes, that movie is basically as old as I am, which I thought was astonishing. Anyway, hello, dear knowledge workers. This is AI, the I is in intelligence, so I thought we actually kick off on the knowledge side. And because you are all knowledge workers, I think you might appreciate that. Because we all know knowledge is power. This is Francis Bacon in the God knows what was that, 16th, 17th century. And I was wondering, well, is that still so? Because then I started looking at data as we have it today. Does anyone of you, other than Claudia, who works for IBM and will know that, but do you know what an exabyte is?
No.
10 to the power of 18. It's a really, really, really big number. But you know, it's very, very hard to visualize, and therefore I thought, okay, so this is a picture of the University of the Library of Commerce, which is the largest library in the world. Unless you speak with the head of marketing of the British Library, they claim that it's bigger. But so the entire printed content of the Library of Commerce fits in an exabyte. 100,000 times over. Now, this year, we will transact information over the internet to the tune of around 1,100 exabytes. That is 110 million times the contents of the largest library in the world in 1 year. And all that knowledge is in everyone's pocket right now, because you can access it on your phone at pretty much any given time, and at almost everywhere in the world, unless you're in three and in this room, because there's no data. Now, therefore, the question I think needs to be asked is knowledge still power? Now, when I got invited to speak here, I thought, what the heck is business psychology? I'm fascinated by the discipline, but I didn't know actually that it existed as a discipline. So I Googled it, and I'm not sure if you can see it, but I got 5.8 million results in 0.46 seconds. And then in terms of, you're the experts in here, you're pretty much the nucleus of this thing. 5.8 million results, you read that? No bloody way you did. So that's the backdrop, and that leaves us all in a space that is a little bit, well, uncertain, isn't it? I mean, 5.8 million, you're now scrambling and thinking, okay, how much do I actually know? Is that maybe a percent of what's out there in my discipline? Can I really call myself an expert? But that is the world we live in today, and it is the world that we will have to make up with. The question then to me is, what next? Is this dystopia? Is this really, if data takes over, there's no way that any one person can inform herself over all that stuff that's around her. And by the way, another science fiction reference, this is Sarah Connor from the Terminator. I hope you know that.
Yeah.
Good. Right. Now, you all work with people, right? With people in the workforce. And I thought I'd give you an outline on what that workforce would look like in the future. Now, factory workers, this won't shock you. Those things have been around forever. I replaced the picture for that slide with the Tesla factory in view of recent developments. But so that's been around forever. Here's an interesting thing, though. So Foxconn is the largest factory in the world. They employ 300,000 people. So at any given moment, there's more than 100,000 Foxconn workers building PCs, smartphones, God knows what, and the iPhone. So they replaced 60,000 of their workers with robots. They're thinking, well, I mean, that's a factory worker. But that means that someone who earns $5 a day is now more expensive than technology. Warehouse logistics. This is an existing Amazon warehouse, and those things are robots. Amazon aims to deliver, well, to basically from the moment you click buy to the parcel leaving their warehouse, to bring that down to 13 minutes. Those things, at the moment, it's a pretty crude thing, but they drive shelves towards the people who pack the stuff. They also have packaging machines, but there are certain products that are a bit hard to package yet for a machine. But the throughput is just a lot higher. You don't have people running through a very, very large warehouse and trying to find stuff. The same is true already for very large parcels. This is the Port of Los Angeles, which is largely automated, and all the containers are basically driving themselves around, guided by magnetic strips in the concrete. Now, closer to home, quite literally, this is your future cleaner. Roomla is a robotic vacuum cleaner, Hoover, or did we say Dyson these days? I don't know. So this thing drives itself around, and you think, well, and, you know, this is not actually something unique. There's whole stores for that. This goes on for pages and pages and pages. This was page 1 out of 60. So all this is there. Now, a bit scarier, meet your new policeman. This thing runs faster than Usain Bolt. And you can equip it with a weapon. Nightscope is a little company my son really wants to work with. He said, oh look, Dad, friendly Daleks. But they are real life, today live security robots. They basically roam parking lots and it's parental control. Here's a sniper. You can buy this thing today, certainly on the dark web, probably on the slightly lighter one as well. Now further job destruction. Builders, there's a robot, you can only see a bit of it in the background, but that will construct and build a house made out of bricks, like a proper house, not something weird and fancy and sprayed on by plastic, but a proper house in 2 days. You know, there's no human will be able to compete with that thing. This is Hadrian X, it's an Australian company, they're going live with that, commercially live with that next year. Pizza delivery, you know, those drones, pretty cool, right? Now, you know, this is not a mock-up. You know, this is actually Domino's using this company, and they want to launch later this year in New Zealand, where there's slightly less people around that you can hit. More sheep, but less people. But just picture this, that it will be possible to get a pizza delivered by a freaking drone this year. And if you think, well, you know, yes, there's also robots to make pizza for you. They disrupt probably the pizza making space. Now, and if you think, well, you know, pizza is a bit boring, yes, there's also a robot that can do all sorts of different meals. So that's the hospitality industry largely destroyed. So here's your new driver. Again, Uber went live together with Ford on self-driving Ubers in Pittsburgh, I think they launched. Yeah. And I think they went live in 13 hours ago. No, they went live sometime in August. So again, that's there. Self-driving cars in months. Now, I live up north in Cheshire, and I did take delivery of one of those things 10 days ago. So yesterday we drove down, and about half the time that car drove itself on autopilot. Spooky. Also really cool. But it is, I mean, you know, they require you to have a hand on the wheel. but the thing literally drives itself. Today, commercially available, on the roads. And you know, the really interesting thing is, and that brings me back to data, and I get to the whole other stuff a little later, but so this is a graph, this is July 15, so it's actually a year out, and exponential means that it will probably be somewhere above that. But this is the amount of information that Tesla collects on miles driven. And this was July last year, the top is 1.2 billion miles. And they basically communicate this back to the cars every single time. So every mile I ride, every pothole I hit, every curve I hopefully don't hit, will be recorded, and the effect will be that the next guy who comes around the corner actually will have a better driving experience because the car will have more knowledge. Yes, the car will have more knowledge. One example where you can see this on the left from where you sit, that's how a normal map looks to a car. And it basically says, okay, so this is the M40, and then this is exit something. This is high precision maps which are being augmented by cars on the road every single moment in time. And as you now know, it is not only can you turn left here, but that's actually what most people do. No one really goes there. And when you look at self-driving cars, you know, that means that they will be more cautious if you turn left than right. Now, all this actually then enables bigger cars as well. This thing is on the road in Nevada right now. It was the first self-driving truck that got full road permission there for the funny AU, AU's autonomous whatever. Freightliner is a Mercedes-owned company, and they're putting it even out in my super skeptical, very, very, very cautious country of birth, Germany, this year. Now, because life in a self-driving car might get a little boring, because you don't have much to do, Toyota recently announced that again, for Christmas this year, you can buy this little guy for $400. And that will react to your driving environment. So, you know, if you brake a little harder, he or she, would say, oops, or something like that, and make conversation with you. Now, Kirobo Mini, which is that dude, is actually the younger sister, let's say, of that one. And Kirobo actually was already on the International Space Station and did the same thing for people there, so they're not so lonely when they're cruising around above the Earth. Closer to home again, there's a musician, Emily Howe. 2, I think, album releases so far. You can stream it on Spotify as well. The really interesting thing is, Emily is an algorithm. And I've listened to it, and it's nice classical piano music, algorithmically composed. Now, the interesting thing is, if you have really good eyes, Emily was released in February 2009. So this is really, really, really old. It was an experiment by a professor in music technology in, I think, UCLA. But, so they can also make music now. They can also play table tennis really, really well, which is really hard because those little ping pong balls are very light and there's a lot of spin on it. So now, another interesting part of that bit is this is not coming from Silicon Valley or some super fancy. This is constructed in Vietnam and invented in Vietnam. Now, things from my point of view get much more interesting with Baxter. And not because he is a friendly, smiley iPad face, but Baxter can learn. So all those little things at the top of his head are cameras. And with that, he will monitor what you're doing and will then try to do the same thing. And so you can teach Baxter how to fold a shirt by folding a shirt. And then Baxter will try and figure out how to best fold a shirt. Now, last month, a professor from Brown, I think, in Providence, came up with a new interface where she starts exchanging data about these learned things between robots. And that means not only there's Baxter folding a shirt, but that means not only can they now learn, but they can also share. And they can share between different languages. So Hirobo from Japan, who writes Japanese C# something, can actually communicate then with Baxter from Pittsburgh or wherever he's from to do that. Are you scared yet? Yeah. IBM Watson. You might remember this. This is a few years back. IBM has always had this thing with games, right? So at first it was Deep Blue beating someone in chess. Now this thing is Watson playing Jeopardy. Now Jeopardy is really, really hard from an AI perspective because it is not an if this then that thing, but you basically have to reverse engineer. And as you can see, Watson kind of outperformed with a slight margin two of the best ever playing Jeopardy players in the world. Now, that was a proof of concept thing, of course, just to show people how an AI solution works. Last year, Watson is now more engaged in finding the cure for cancer. It's highly effective for sort of marketing technology and all that sort of stuff. So there. Now, together with the Tesla last 10 days ago, the Echo arrived in our house. And it's really funny to see my wife conversing with it because she would say, Alexa, would you please be doing this? So she's actually speaking to a piece of hardware in very polite British terms. The amazing thing is, I mean, we were sitting around the table, there was music playing, there were glasses on the table, people were chatting with each other, and you say, hey Alexa, can you play some, whatever, Britney Spears? And the microphones will pick it up, it will interpret correctly, and then it will go to my Spotify library and play it. But you can ask Alexa pretty much anything. You know, who's Arsenal playing? I tried, is Jeff Bezos a nice guy, but the Echo wouldn't answer that. If you say, Alexa, thank you, she'll either say you're welcome or anytime or something like that. Now again, this thing costs, I think, 100 quid or 150 pounds. Our main use case at the moment is still playing music and that sort of stuff, but it's also, you can say, Alexa, can you set the timer for 30 minutes because you have your hands in pizza dough because the pizza delivery robot hasn't arrived yet. So there's a lot of little stuff that you can do with these things. And when it comes to speech and voice, the really, really, really smart people from Google DeepMind. DeepMind was a British company acquired by Google last year, I think. But they've just announced, and this is 3 weeks ago, WaveNet, which basically, it's a generative model for raw audio. So in other words, the next version of Andy Howell cannot only play piano, but it will be able to sing. And you will not be able to tell that this is a robot or a synthetic voice from a human voice. And it will be entirely self-generated without using samples and patching them together. So, you know, there's not the funny, when you're in a waiting line, you're in number 2 of this. It will literally be as if a person will talk to you. And again, this is being produced today. They published a peer-reviewed scientific paper and are basically putting the software into motion now. Now, I used to be a lawyer. And you know, because all our parents told us, look, son, study law, that's something, you'll have a safe job. No, you won't. No, you won't. And when I did the first version of this talk, about 18 months ago, 15 months ago, this slide looked different. I just suggested, well, you know, this will come. Now, there's an AI lawyer called Ross.ai, and this thing actually got hired, in other words, deployed in the bankruptcy practice of Baker & Hostetler, which is one of the larger US firms, and then Clifford Chance, one of the largest UK firms, one of the Magic Circle ones, they're just deploying Kira to help them out on M&A due diligence. And that's the stuff where the big firms make a lot of money, because you can basically deploy tons of young associates and charges through to your clients. That will not happen for so much longer. Now, if that is not enough yet, raw AI is very, very fast becoming a commodity. There is, so DeepMind, Microsoft has Cortana and Azure machine learning. You can link it to Watson. Alchemy is an NLP company that IBM acquired. And again, for instance, to extract the language from a YouTube video, so it costs you 2p. Amazon is of course in there, as you would expect, but there's also a ton of smaller players now, some very, very specialized, some very generic that are coming out there. And most of them are SaaS models. In other words, you know, on lower volumes, you can buy these services and integrate them into your app for pennies. And then if it scales up, you will want to have another chat with them, because then of course you will also buy more. But again, this is today. This is not in 10 years' time, guys. And the result of that is that automation will kill every single job it can, even a $5 a day Chinese factory worker. And that means that we're looking at a fundamental change of how the world works and how the world of work works. Because all of a sudden, there's a couple of people that will do just fine. There's a lot of people, just think of self-driving cars. There's 400 million people in this world make a living of transporting stuff or people from A to B. That's 400 million people out of a job. Now, why does a professional trucker become a driver? Because he hasn't learned anything. Now, it is not so easy to reskill such a person, and we'll have to have a look. It's a societal challenge right there. Now, if you translate this into fancy language, basically the question you need to ask yourself is your job below the API or above the API? API is an application programming interface. In other words, can I deploy AI to replace you? Remember, it thinks really hard. It knows a lot. It will be able to speak like everyone else in soft, soothing tones. So, you know, will it? As I said, I was a lawyer. I thought that should be pretty safe. However, there'll be a couple of new jobs for you. And this is an interesting challenge for educators, because what the heck do you learn if you become a memory augmentation therapist? And this will be a discipline, I'm fairly sure. I've read an article about someone who said we need to learn how to educate plants, not factories, plants, veggie. Nano-web specialist? I'm sure there's, under Trump, there will be some work to be done there. And what the heck is a diffractive optics modeler? And what do I need to learn to become one? Does anyone of you know?
It's for doing holograms, creating holograms.
That's right. And this was a job ad from last year. This is an actual job right there. I mean, Magic Leap is arguably one of the coolest companies on the planet right now. So I doubt that Tesla needs diffractive optics models just yet. But this is, again, this is already here. Now, how do we educate our kids for this? We don't even know how it looks. And this is an informed guess based on where science is today. And you know, I'm not cutting edge anymore. I'm getting old. So I'm certain there's stuff out there that I have no idea about. And now we dive really into the future. Ray Kurzweil is a futurologist. And he's one who actually got it right a couple of times. This was his first workplace, the MIT Whirlwind, which in its days was the largest computer, or the fastest computer in the world. Kurzweil today works for Google. And this is the Google Compute Engine, which is effectively a massive array of insane amount of computing power. And you may have heard of Gordon Moore, or Moore's Law, you know, which basically means that every 18 months, 2 years, the number of transistors on a chip will double. And then it looks roughly like this. but because it's exponential, it actually looks like this. Now, Moore's law is dying. It's now 3 years or 3.5 years since the last doubling up, and Intel won't be coming out with anything before 2017. So when I was speaking to my son, who studies physics, he said, "Dad, it doesn't matter. We're coming out with quantum computing." And another shout out to IBM. He's writing his bachelor thesis on IBM's quantum machine, whatever it's called. But it's an actual quantum computer with 5 qubits. Now, to put this into perspective, because I really don't understand that stuff, you know, a quantum thing can have 2 states, it can be here and not here at the same time. And if you put it into a super state, then the whole matrix in which it exists can also be here at the same time, or not. But he said like that. So IBM thinks that by the end of the decade, there'll be at 100 qubits. And to put that into perspective, 300 qubits, so only 3 times that, are enough to basically make a copy of every single particle in the known universe. Welcome to Matrix. Because if you can do that, then you could actually recreate a virtual version of the universe. Every single particle of it. Now, Kurzweil. Do you know what TLDR is?
Too long.
Fingers up, who knows? Jesus Christ, guys. You need to spend more time with the kids. It's short for too long, didn't read. Because Kurzweil over the years has spent a lot of, he wrote a lot of stuff, and it's interesting reading. So Kurzweil TR is this. He basically says, look, faster computing will lead to faster innovation because, you know, as computers come up, they will be able, you can just throw computing power at solutions. That should mean that we get better and faster in finding solutions to really hard problems. And that means that, you know, diseases, hunger, energy, this will all be solved, which effectively will lead us to immortality. And then he, I think, lit his first joint. But you know, then our bodies become obsolete. All people would just exist as minds, and then, of course, we will all interconnect and become one large hive mind. I don't know if we're going all the way, but it's certainly possible. I mean, you know, we can basically create a virtual universe, and surely we can do the other stuff as well. So there's change ahead, fundamental change. And this doesn't have to be dystopian, by the way. You know, if we design the right stuff in the right ways, then we can actually turn all this around so that it does good things. But one thing we cannot do, and that's my message to you, you have to start thinking about this today, because otherwise we will have some amoral engineers in the valley doing it for us. And I haven't said immoral, but amoral, because in engineering, morality and ethics don't play a role, they don't compute. So I would suggest that we need a little bit more than that in order to make sure that all this power works for us. Now the interesting thing, of course, right, change, that was always true. I mean, Schopenhauer said that change alone is eternal, perpetual, immortal. And then when you then go back and work with your clients, their reaction very often to these things is like this. Because, you know, we don't like change. I spoke to my brother over this Tesla thing, and he says, God, no. You know what, I mean, electric stuff and self-driving, are you kidding me? I'm never going to get into one of those. Of course he will. Because he lives in Germany, and the Germans just appealed to the European Union that in 2030, internal combustion engines should be banned. Now, if they will or not, I don't care. But, not to leave the EU, right? So you know, but humans are programmed. You know, we're not comfortable in stuff we don't know. We really aren't. And therefore, there is a bazillion reasons why this can't change. I remember on a subset of what you guys are doing, assessments, I've had maybe 5 years ago or so, I was speaking with someone who said, digital stuff, you know, whereas the rigor in that won't ever come. Because of course, they were doing written things, etc., and they didn't really understand how they would transfer their own business. And only like 5 or 6 years later, well, you know, of course it's coming. And, but it is a painful thing to look at that. This wave is so fundamental, you cannot afford not to think about this. However, this is basically how these things work when you work through change, right? And guys, this is really good news for you because you know you have to manage all those people through that curve, and there is a job for you, I think. Because when we look at where is the path for humanity really, but also for each and every one of us when it comes to it, I'm rushing through. So I think we need to have a look at what is specifically humane. What makes us human? And there's first of all, that's passion. Passion is something that computers don't really do that well. They can fake it a little bit, but they don't. A computer would never ever think of making a jacket by hand and hand stitching the buttonholes, unlike my wife who did this jacket, because it don't make much money. It's a passion. The next thing is empathy, because machines can't really feel, or so we think. They can't really feel. We have to be a bit careful there, because so empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Now, AI will almost certainly be able to understand it, and it will be able to share it. But the understanding, of course, will be a fake understanding, not empathy in the true sense. What you guys, what people like you can do, or a teacher can do, or a kindergartner can do, is show true empathy, which is something that for emotional well-being is incredibly important. Creativity is another one. You've probably heard of this thing with chimps basically hacking on typewriters, and if you let them hack for long enough, they will, at some time in the future, they will recreate the Ulysses. But that's like the equivalent of brute force computing, and is not very effective and not very efficient. So creativity is really good. The last one of my favorites, is critical thought. Because in particular when it goes to thinking forward, we have to be a little bit careful on this. And this is because our model of logic is based on Aristotelian logic. And there was one element in there which we need to be cautious with when it comes to the future, and that is deductive inference. That's where the whole logics model was based on. We look back, we see this is how it was, then we basically deduce from it and we make our assessment. Now, for something that we know nothing about, there's nothing to fall back on. Now this, when you go back to creativity, actually makes this thing a stronghold for humanity. But what you will have realized is that the poor truck driver, we better make sure that in the future we educate our kids better, because for truck drivers that'll be really hard. If we, however, follow this stuff, this will be a tool set that we can use to save ourselves. And start creating a future that uses all that immense power, but makes it brighter. And that is it. Thank you very much.